Grady Culhane, the CapeCod.com News Center, here to talk about one of the Cape's hottest new trends as well as one of its most divisive, pickleball. Do you mind introducing yourself for our listeners? A special guest today?
Sure, Grady. I'm John Cotton. I work at Rock and Trust. I'm a commercial lender by day. I am also an avid pickleballer, and I also have 9 years as a Mashpee Selectman.
All right, awesome. And thank you for finding the time today to come down to the studio and talk to me in person. This is obviously going to have the video component up on CapeCod.com for those who are listening. And he is in full pickleball dress. He's ready to go. He's got the Smashpee title across. Is that a team or is that, what is the Smashpee?
Yeah, Smashpee started as, once we got the pickleball courts in Mashpee back in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a social media Facebook page that we started, which actually has now, I think, 1,700 members.
Wow, okay. So once again, speaks to the popularity of the new sport. So I wanted to ask a little bit about, we're going to touch on everything. We're going to hit the controversies of the sound, of course, but first I want to focus on, what is the appeal? When did you first start pickleballing, and how did you find some local players to play with, and what is the enjoyment to you? Why this instead of a very visually familiar, similar sport like tennis or badminton?
Good question. So, it's funny for me, tennis, I always found it was hard entry, much larger court, but just, I think the hard entry into the sport, you were either good or you were bad. I think pickleball is it's so easy to start. You can just, if you have a paddle, you don't have to set up a tee time, you just show up and you play and have fun, and you play with your levels of that to your talent level. Mm-hmm. You play amongst those peers, and you kind of move up the ranks from beginner to intermediate to advanced. So for me, it was more about 5 years ago. It was probably a year into getting the Mashpee courts built that I didn't even know anything about it. And then one person said, "Hey, do you want to just try it?" And once I tried it, and I think anybody that I introduced to the sport to just try it, they are now,
they're hooked.
They are hooked.
It's a drug.
Worse than me, which is it's a big statement.
John, what I'm finding out is I'm in danger of becoming another pickleball enjoyer. I've not tried myself yet, but now I am intrigued. So what are for those who aren't familiar, do you mind talking a little bit more about the differences between pickleball and tennis? So it's a smaller court, but it's like almost a perfect half size of the tennis court, it seems, because I've been finding that a lot of towns are able to fit like twice as many pickleball courts inside the tennis. So it's very efficient from like a construction standpoint, really.
It is.
But are there other rules differences or any other kind of
nuances?
Very
I'd say it's very different. It doesn't go by like the 15 and 30 and
sure.
30 and
the scoring.
45. Yeah, scoring is very different. But it is, you get points only when you are serving. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a lot like pickleball. So it's bigger than pickleball. I mean, bigger than ping pong, smaller than tennis. It fits right in there somewhere. A lot of racquetballers can do well because it's the speed of the paddle, and but you get all talents, shapes, and sizes of. You get the tennis players, which hit the ball a certain way, and then they change their stroke to accommodate to pickleball, and then you got the ping pong players. They love the spin, and you could tell if they're a ping ponger because they don't come at it like hit it. They give it a little slice to everything's a slice. So everything's the super spin.
It's very interesting to see the two different schools being able to kind of like meet in the middle here on this. It's very intriguing.
It's so true. So when you're playing against sometimes the ping pong talent comes out, and sometimes it's a good time to use a shot like that.
I see.
And then sometimes not so much, but you just get that by practice and play, and I just can't get enough of it.
I'm going to get reverse hand curveballed by like a star ping pong player. on Cape Cod is what I'm gathering. So the appeal, like on Cape Cod, it's been huge, and I wasn't quite sure if it's because if it's the smaller courts, you don't have to run as far, and so maybe if you're not quite as athletic, or especially if you're on the older side, I mean, there's no denying we have a huge older population on Cape Cod of 65 and up individuals, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But I can see where maybe a sport that you don't have to maybe put as much stress on your knees or on the elbows can really take off. Do you think that has something to do with it, or is there some cultural impact too?
I think there's a lot of point to that. I think, like specifically like tennis, I think as you get older, tennis becomes, because it's a lot more running. I think pickleball is a lot more about agility and quickness, and it might be a step or two quickly in one direction or another. But a lot of people, I mean, they look like universal soldiers. I mean, they come and they put their knee pads on, their braces on, and
whatever you need.
Whatever you need. If you have a weak knee, put put the brace on and go play. You don't want to hurt yourself. There are some injuries, but I think there's a lot more physical benefits to it. I mean, you got to be smart. I mean, if you feel something, bothering you or, affecting your play, maybe you need to give it a little rest.
Now, a lot of sports, some of the a lot of issues for certain things, like there can be a tremendous barrier of entry. So I was wondering as well, what is the barrier of entry for pickleball, and does it make it a little bit more appealing than, say, like golf? You need to have a whole thing, right? You need to have your various clubs for all the different possible shots that you might need to take, and then goodness gracious, equestrian, you need the horse. I mean, there's all kinds of sports where it can get astronomical very quickly. What do you need for pickleball, and do you think that makes it more appealing?
Another actually an amazing question. I think that's what it makes it so easy, and I think that's the reason why the ease of entry to pickleball, because that's caused the growth in pickleball to be just off the charts. Because unlike if you're in golf or your passion for tennis, you got to reserve a court in most cases, although you used to. Now most courts are vacant. And now there's pickleballers. But I think the idea that you can just show up with a paddle, which is right here.
Yeah, actually, let's hold it up to the camera. Do you mind if I poke around as well while you're continuing?
Absolutely.
So just the paddle.
So yeah, you just show up with a paddle. You show up with court shoes. Court sneakers are probably recommended because it's just to keep running shoes can be a little bit weak, short on support on the ankles. So. With that, you show up with the paddle and you're ready to play. You don't have to reserve a court, the whole thing. You just show up outside a court and you can game on.
And that's a paddle that is by Franklin, I'm noticing. So this is supported by like major sports industry gearing.
Oh yeah.
But as well, you said there's a story to this one. This is a Red Sox themed pickleball paddle.
Yes.
By Franklin, USA Pickleball approved. My goodness, there's a USA approved. I didn't realize that there was agencies that could be involved.
It's an amazing.
Right.
There's all these organizations and agents and companies all set up on pickleball, and it's still growing. So people think it's not tailing off; it's still growing. And I mean, the weight on pickleball courts, weights on games keeps on growing. So there's a need for more and more courts.
Okay.
So this pickleball paddle, it specifically was actually we played a group of Smashpee players in Mashpee. We got together and we actually played in Fenway Park last year. So last summer they right on the field they put like hardwood courts right over the diamond, and we played pickleball there, and it was a weekend long event, and it was amazing. It was so much fun.
Very
right in
impressive.
Fenway Park.
Wow, I know they do concerts and stuff, but I did not know about this pickleball event. That's very intriguing.
Very cool. So, and then it just by signing up, we ended up getting this courtesy pickleball paddles. So it was pretty cool.
That is awesome, and now you have a memento as well as a seal of your success story of Fenway Park. Now, as well, I did promise earlier in the segment that we were going to talk about some of the controversies that surround it. Namely, we come across the Well, space. It takes space. You need to have dedicated courts. I don't know exactly how much of an impact that has because once again, you can just reuse the tennis courts. So I actually want to ask you if that's like another reason why it can become very appealing for towns to invest in because they can get two sports for the price of one court. But also it's the sound. So can you talk a little bit about the sound? Have you had people come and complain to you while you're playing? Have you come up against it, or were you yourself concerned when you first started, and now that you've been playing a bit more, what are your general thoughts on it? Is it something that you've noticed yourself, or do you think it's just a vocal minority? Like where do you think it stands?
I think it's definitely a vocal minority, but I think there were some mistakes made where a lot of courts were set up a little too close to residents. So I think those kind of got highlighted in the media, and so I could speak specifically for Mashpee. We did have some neighborly concerns, and we addressed that. We actually added a soundproofing wall, which cost thousands of dollars, which surrounded the entire three sides of the court, and that I believe helped a lot. But it does create. There is a noise. It does create a noise that if you are too close to residents, it's that knocking noise that is constant. It doesn't happen obviously in rainy days, so there is some reprieve. And you typically don't play. They're not lit courts, so at night it's not an issue. Like in Mashpee, we have a curfew on our courts is 7:30, so by 7:30 it stops. And it's typically night at that time, so it's pretty hard to see.
My bedtime's 7:45 at this point, so not really too much in my field of things. So okay, but that is interesting. So a lot of it, just you think, is more to do with like just more of a planning failure, dare I say? It's not like inherently pickleball is the problem. It's just it could have been any game or sport that could have suffered the same kind of consequence.
I agree. Yeah, I mean it's definitely it's noisy, but it's like with any new sport or whatever. There's becomes certain challenges. I think they're getting wise to the realization that it does create a little bit of a noise that can be a nuisance, and more of a nuisance to some. And but if they build new courts, put them in the right place. And if you have to do other things to suppress, there are paddles out there now that actually are almost padded, and it does suppress. It does take away from that type of game, but if everyone's playing in the same type of paddles,
so it's not it could be a handicap otherwise, where it's like not as much kinetic force can be imparted because
right. So it does probably if someone hits the ball incredibly hard, it probably brings them down a little bit to closer to the rest of the field. But at the same time, if everyone's playing with the same paddles out, there's so many companies out there, and it's the choices on paddles and choices on balls, it's amazing. I mean, every time I typically play like 4 hours on a Saturday and 4 hours on a Sunday.
Oh my! You're much more fit than I, John. You're good to go. Okay.
I just can't stop. So it's like, one more game. One more game.
I found the right guy for this interview. He's ready. All right. But yeah, so that's it. But I wonder if we're going to see like a bylaw in the future where it's like you can play here, but everybody's got to have like the vulcanized rubber paddles almost. Like that's part of a necessary an entry thing almost.
Yeah.
Do you worry for that or?
In some cases, I mean, again, we're pretty much surrounded by trees and woods. So in Mashpee, I think we're pretty good as far as coverage on that. But, like I said, it's just don't build new courts if they're outside. Just don't put them right next door to someone's backyard or.
Well, a lot of them were like repurposed tennis ball courts, and I'm like, were those not as noisy? I guess they're not because the ball is not felt covered as well. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how come it was an issue before?
Yeah, I mean, I think in most cases, I guess I'm speaking for like Mashpee, like Falmouth, and maybe Marston's Mills.
Sure.
Most of those they may have repurposed and draw additional lines on the tennis courts, but most cases they're not those aren't played on a daily basis. So they may be played on like a tournament
Sure.
where you need additional courts, and then they'll put the temporary nets up and they'll use the tennis court space. So it's all about. Usually, it's on the the pickleball courts, exclusive pickleball courts, like in Mashpee, like in Marston's Mills. Those courts are incredibly used, but people only play pickleball on those courts. The tennis courts are more additional overflow capacity. So, and then I think in most cases that's the way it's been. But there has been places where there's been, say, 6 tennis courts, and there's now only 2, and 4 of those tennis courts have been converted to pickleball courts. A lot of country clubs and developments, they've either added pickleball courts or they've converted their tennis or one of their percentage of their tennis to pickleball.
Yeah, both private industry and municipalities are very getting invested. I guess is just the right word. Real
Right.
money's been put down on it. I'm almost sensing. I'm wondering if there's some new industry planning that can be done where you can have the pickleball courts and like some other sport that surrounds it to help block the noise, like skate park or something. But who knows? I don't know. But it's intriguing to see so much involvement. I also just before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about that kind of culture you mentioned before of like. If you can find somebody your skill level, and there's a lot more like window of opportunity for growth and stuff like that. But before we move on to that, is there anything else we want to add about like construction? Maybe address a little bit more of the sound stuff online that you've been seeing, or
Yeah, as far as sound, I mean, for the most part, it's the soundproofing walls. I mean, there's always this new technology that's coming out, and I think that's still being researched because of the growth in pickleball.
Sure.
That's a constant, and some pickleball facilities that were constructed, maybe they were built in a not the greatest of choice of locations. So with those, I think they have to do the research, the extra research to say, sound suppression and what can we do? If not, do we have to relocate? But it is one of those things. It's a low. One other thing I think is the low cost of entry to the sport. That is, I know I kind of talked about it, but besides like court shoes and a pickleball paddle, it's a pickleball. And there's plenty of them at the courts, and everybody has them. So beyond that, you can play pickleball without tee times and all that. Where that's, I think the easy entry is such a big thing, and that's the reason for the growth of pickleball.
Yeah, actually, I haven't heard recently of this being an issue actually, so I don't want to like make problems where there aren't any, especially as a reporter. But has traffic been like an issue, or like parking, considering people have been like it's so easy to get into and there is no need for the tee times yet? Has that been like a consideration, or do you think there's been a few failures, or for the most part has it been balanced?
I think that
Speaking for Mashpee
specifically for Mashpee, I've not a traffic thing at all. Only because it's not a in and out with cars.
Sure.
I mean, I pull in at 7:45, and I'm not pulling out of there till typically 1:00 in the afternoon. But that's and I think most cars there in general, you're there for at least 2 hours. So if that's the case, you say there's 60 people on a court, they're going to be there for a couple hours at a time. It's not a whole lot of traffic added in general. Unlike, if you're looking at like fields, and we're also adjacent to the Mashpee fields, like the soccer fields and all that. So in the summertime, I mean, that traffic for the fields is a whole lot more than just the pickleball. And we're also right next door to the dog park, which is not a bad thing. And, the dogs seem to bark once in a while, and that's kind of noisy. But that's what dogs do, and they don't bother us. We don't bother them. And
you're bothering them because you won't give them the ball. That's the problem.
That's
Hitting
a
it
good
back
point.
and forth. That's the real issue there. But okay, yeah, that is good to know. So there's a lot of sports. I don't remember who said it, but this was another media person back in like the 60s or 70s, where they're talking about like baseball and soccer, and like every town used to be able to have like a hometown hero that was like really good at this stuff. But then like once you have the nationwide sports like football and baseball, suddenly it's like, well, I'm never going to be as good as Tom Brady. So like I don't really feel like what's the point in like going and playing football or something like that. But right now pickleball is kind of like in this, it feels like the sweet spot, it seems, from what you're describing, where it's like there's not really like super celebrities, or like you guys don't really know like what does the pinnacle of pickleball look like right now. So suddenly everybody is the best at pickleball in their own circle. Do you think that's purely cultural at that point, and purely the way you interact with it? But can you talk more about that?
Yeah, no, another great point. I think it gets back to that, the easy entry, but also, to your point, everybody is. It's just more. It's more fun. I mean, for me, it's the competitive. I'm very competitive, but I don't care necessarily about am I the first one to 11, because that's typically it's first one to win by 2 up to 11. It's not about the win and loss. It's about that one shot, or that, that one thing that you did in that game. You're like, yeah, I got to repeat that. So it's the challenge and the competitiveness. So that's what I love. And I think in like your own right, like it's like anything else, like in sports and pitchers, you have good days and you have bad days, and you have good games, and the next game, one game you could play and everything is in. Everything just hits that line, just works for you, and you feel like, wow, I could beat anybody. And the next game, everything is just 1 inch out, and you're like, what is wrong with me? I should just go home.
No.
And it's frustrating, but it's all about that competitive, and you're playing with other people. And the other thing is, something about pickleballers, they're like the best people on the planet. The personalities, everybody's there for the same reason, to have fun, enjoy each other's company, and you know what? It's a great workout. I mean, it's an incredible workout. If you're smart about it, I mean, injury, accidents always happen, and no matter what you're doing, you could be walking into the supermarket and trip over a curb.
Oh, I broke my toe on the stairs just last year, so no
See?
no pickleball necessary for that one. But yeah, no, I understand. But please continue, though.
Yeah. So, and I think it's just the love for the sport is the competitiveness, the fact that I can just, hey, you know what? I have a couple hours. I just throw some shorts on, throw a shirt on, grab my racket, and for that matter, it's always in my car because I'm ready.
I was just about to ask, like, can you just have a racket in? Like, one's in my lunchbox, one's in my car.
I have
ready to go.
5 more probably in my truck right now.
All right, is it an artistic expression? Do you have like different themes of art on them or anything?
No,
or?
but what happens is there's a grit to them.
They wear off?
If you play off, so the grit kind of wears off. So you go to hit it, if you put a little spin on it, it'll wear off. But you still have your favorites. This, I don't use that often. I use it more of as an extra paddle. But
that was another thing, is that if the equipment is cheap, that means you can keep 2 or 3 extra for people who want to get into the hobby.
Well, that's it. And I literally keep a backpack with probably 6 to 8 paddles, just in case someone watches on. And that's how most people get started. They just go to the courts, they watch on, and they're like, hey, do you want to play? They're like, oh, I never played, the whole thing. You give them a paddle, and you get them to start playing. I mean, one game, and they're like, and that's how it happened with me. I went home that night, went online, ordered myself a paddle, and the rest is history.
And it's that easy. All right, we're about coming up on time, but it's been very elucidating to learn more about kind of what the appeal is for you guys, as well as talking a little bit about the sound and stuff like that. But is there any other things you want to add about the recreation? It's like it's another tool in the toolbox for like recreation centers and stuff like that. Do you think it's good for towns to have access to relatively cheap hobbies and sports that they can have like this? Because once again, it's a bit more expensive for tennis and stuff like that, or golfing. But this does seem like it's much more useful for like a recreation center or council on aging or something. It depends, but
Yeah, no, another great point. I think like so the Mary Bradbury is the director of activities in Mashpee, and she was the biggest proponent of getting the pickleball courts in Mashpee. In fact, Mashpee was the first public new built courts on Cape Cod. So and then I think Marston's Mills followed that as well with their courts. But so as far as advocates and so she doesn't have to do anything. Like once she got the courts done, it's a free sport. It gets people outdoors, and I think any sport that I don't care if it's disc golf, if it's anything out there, any sport or activity that can get kids, adults, seniors, people outdoors and off video games, off their phones. I think that's a great thing to have, and it's just offer it to the townspeople and offer it. We don't restrict people from out of other towns, so Mashpee courts are wide open to play from. No matter what your town, you show up, you want to play pickleball, game on. And I think that goes back to the easy entry. Everyone is welcome to play.
All right, awesome, John. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I really appreciate it. Do you hold tournaments? Is there going to be some upcoming events anytime soon you wanted to highlight while you're here for our listeners?
We do. In fact, last year we actually held a Red Cross tournament.
Oh, nice.
And that worked out incredibly well. And the biggest thing about the tournaments it's always challenging because it's outdoors, and it's rain continue. If it's raining, it's over. So there's also an exciting opportunity. There's a big pickleball. It's called Island Pickle. It's a project for 37. I believe it's 37,000 square feet structure. That's going to be an indoor pickleball facility, sports bar, the whole thing, and that actually is going to be supposed to be built in Mashpee.
Okay, and that's just the early stages right now.
It's,
not gonna.
They hope to actually start construction by the end of the year.
All right, we will stay tuned. That'd be very interesting to see.
That will be really cool and very interesting. So, on top of that, you mentioned like USA Pickleball. Jill Alpert actually is also a member of Mashpee, lives in Mashpee. She is actually I want to make sure I get her title correctly. She is the district ambassador to pickleball for Cape Cod and the islands. And she's also from Mashpee, and she started Smashpee, the Facebook page. But I wanted to close with this. So Smashpee has, on Facebook, has 1,700 members. Team Reach has 860 members, and what Team Reach does is if someone, I guess they call it like a meetup. Hey, I'm a beginner pickleballer. I am looking for people to play in, whatever courts at this time. Is anybody else interested? And it's basically almost like a dating app to play, or a meetup app to play pickleball. So there's Team Reach, there's Smashpee. So if you're looking to get involved with pickleball, you can show up to the courts. You can look on social media. Anybody out there has heard of pickleball at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
I mean, here we are. We're talking about it on the radio, so we've hit the big leagues when it comes to the sport appeal.
it's a great thing.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, thank you, John, so much for joining me for this conversation. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Grady. I appreciate it.
I'm Grady Culhane, and thank you for listening to Sunday Journal.